Welcome to the Mind Man Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Pennycad. And as most of you know or have figured out by now, I serve as an Army reservist, and I've been doing so for the last 14 years. I've had a lot of different experiences. I've had a lot of mentors, role models, and other people that have been involved in my development throughout my career. And I'm happy, very happy that one of them agreed to be on the show today. This man has served in Croatia in the Medak Pocket in 1993 and again deployed to Afghanistan in 2008. He has since been promoted to warrant officer and currently fills the role of the gunnery warrant within the squadron. Simultaneously, he carries on an extremely successful career as the, here we go, Regional Vice President, South Saskatchewan at RBC. See if I got that right. He's one of the best soldiers I've ever met, and somebody whose opinion I respect well more than most. And I'm very, very happy to welcome John Barth. John.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Josh. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm pretty excited to talk about, you gave me a little bit of an intro before we got here. It's an exciting, you got some exciting things to talk about. And great podcast, by the way. So thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a work in progress. Another one of these little side things that I just keep my brain going. I don't know. I can't sit still, so this is just a new thing, I guess.
I have a soapbox speech about that exact topic, but we don't have to cover it. We'll get to it later.
Oh, we can just do so many more podcasts then.
Yeah.
I kind of already spit out your bio, about the professional life. But, before we get into anything real specific, I want the viewers to just get an idea of, who you are on a personal level. I know some of your hobbies, but I don't even know if I know a lot. But, what are those hobbies, interests, family matters? Who is John Barth as opposed to who I'm familiar with, Warrant Officer Barth or Banker Barth in the civilian world?
Yeah, I've got, thanks for the intro. I have a weird life, and I professionally am involved in things that you wouldn't have thought would have got into. I grew up on a grain and beef farm, actually, northwest of Saskatoon. Very traditional farming upbringing, Christian household, but like milking cows by hand, the whole 9 yards. And so grew up with a passion for agriculture, and I still have it till this day. It influenced a lot of my civilian career and kind of how that all worked out. And so somehow I think weirdly just met the right people at the right time, got into the Army, and at the end of my university career, the bank came knocking. I was never looking for a career in banking, and they approached me and thought I'd give it a shot. Here I am. Like, it turned out to be a great career. On the personal side, I'm married with 3 kids. So my wife Lisa, we've been married for 24 years now, and which is hard. That's a hard number to say out loud, but 24 years. And 3 boys. They're 15, 17, 19. So my oldest one is just heading off to university now. And, pastimes, it's getting harder to say what I like doing because my life is pretty busy with work. But most of my life had a passion for hunting. Always loved hunting and shooting. Hunting more than shooting. I know a lot of guys get into long distance shooting and all that stuff. I prefer plinking, and I prefer hunting over that. Scuba diving I got into early, so anytime I travel anywhere tropically, I try to dive. So I've had the pleasure to dive in a lot of different places in the world. Saskatchewan, I've done diving here a bit. It's okay. It's cold, and you can't see a lot. And to be quite honest, when you get to the bottoms of the lakes, it's nothing but beer bottles and golf balls. So I don't do a lot of it here. Woodworking, I've always really had a passion for woodworking, and still do that whenever I get a chance. And fly fishing now. I've been doing that for probably 15 years, and every summer I'm gone for a couple weeks fly fishing in the mountains. Absolutely love it. So that's I guess a quick glimpse into sort of what I do when I'm not working, what my family life is about.
I hear a lot of outdoor activities. That's all I hear is just more army. Those are
Um,
just army things.
yeah, ish. I glamp now. I don't camp hardcore anymore. I get enough of that already in professional careers. So, plus I have a wife and kids. So my wife likes to wake up with a Keurig and a shower.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I guess there's a lot of outdoor stuff. I love video games, but I never play them. It just there's this guilty thing in the back of my mind that you're wasting time. You could be doing something else. Plus, in typical married fashion, anytime a guy sits down and plays video games, you get lasers from across the room from your wife.
Yep.
The honey-do lists start falling on your lap because obviously you've got time to kill to do something. So never really got into it, although I don't blame anybody who is because I love them too.
Video games they were like one of my vices, but yeah, you could my wife would always know because she could hear the machine turn on. I wouldn't even have to say anything. She could hear it turn on from the other room and come barreling down the stairs looking for me. It's
Yeah,
not
and
something.
I do a lot of home renos, and so
Mm.
anytime had time to play video games, obviously I had time to fix something. So yeah, that's which has been good for me. I really can't bemoan my wife making sure I'm busy.
Yeah,
Even though I would love to be neck deep in a Halo or whatever game, but it's not part of my life.
you're aging yourself with Halo.
Oh god,
Although
whatever.
I know there's like 10 of them now. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever the new ones are. My kids play them a bit, but I don't keep track.
I still play old Star Wars games and GameCube because my little kids they love all the old stuff like I did. The Nintendo, right? Everything's cool
Yeah,
on Nintendo.
there's a 1990s game series. Whenever I do get a chance, if I ever get to play like a PC style game, not Command and Conquer, Close Combat. It's like a top down command view of combat, not first person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and it's old, but it's probably still my favorite game. I'll take it over anything that's new.
There, I'll give you a new addiction then because it has to do with warfare. You need to go play Rome Total War or Medieval Total War. The Total War series is incredible and you'll
Is
love
that
it.
those top down command style things?
It's a
Yeah,
map style, turn style, but you actually fight the battles. It's incredible.
yeah. I'm not going to look into it because
You should.
it would be that would be several months of my life that I can't get back.
Yep.
And I know what I would be like. I would totally get into that.
So I wanted to have you on the show today, mainly as a voice of, and I'm going to have quotes around this pretty much the whole show, but the military man. And the one thing that really stuck out to me, um, about you over the past decade, basically decade plus that I've known you, is that you have this ability to change your hat. And for those people that don't understand that that term, we often use it for different roles or jobs that we have either in the workplace or the military. So one day I'm wearing this type of hat, another day I'm wearing the hat of a gunner, or another day I'm the public affairs representative, and so we have different hats. And the other hats we wear are, in the reserves are our civilian careers and our family hats, and these other hats and almost like masks, I guess, that we portray to people outside of the workplace. And you were one of the people that I noticed, and once I got to know you better, that you were very good at taking off the military hat and putting on the family hat. And I know that there are many people that struggle with that transition in particular, is leaving, work at work, and especially with the military, leaving that mindset at work and not bringing it home. So, you know, I wanted to give you a chance to kind of describe how you manage all those different hats, especially with your civilian career as well. Um, how did you get to that point where you were able to do that? And have you always been able to do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's I read this one ahead of time, and I've kind of thought about it a little bit. It's something I would have never noticed unless you brought it up. So this is the first time I've really thought through um, the fact that I actually do change hats a lot, and I do I am different depending on the role that I'm in. Um, and I think I've I'll start with this. I've had a lot of really strong male influences in my life as well. Starting with my father. I grew up in on a farm, Christian household, with a strong leader in the family who was extraordinarily patient. Not a man who almost ever raised his voice or yelled at me. And we worked with cattle. And if you ever work with cattle, there's an opportunity to fly off the deep end a lot. And my uncle was the opposite. So I had kind of two competing role models. One would just lose it wherever anything went wrong, like really lose it. And my dad, who was very calm, cool, collected, never got excited, never got upset about anything. And so um, the that was the first influence in my life around having a comparison side by side on what it meant to be a leader, what it meant to be somebody you could look up to as a father, as a mentor, as a leader. And I think that's where it all started. The military piece. Um, I think the hat I put on there, where I have a bit of a different persona, um, comes from a lot of experience and seeing a lot. And so you get, at a very young age, 20 years old, I saw the front lines of a war. And so that impacted me, I think, a lot in how I behaved later as a leader, knowing what it took to make it through situations or environments like that. And, you know, the pieces that I had to be really firm on and the pieces I could get, be a little looser on, that tight, loose leadership kind of theory. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of things in the military, especially in the combat arms, you have to be tight on. And it, I became quite opinionated on things that needed to be well, in order to keep people alive. And so that, I think that hat, um, fortunately for me, has been a bit easier because when you have that background at such an early age and see it for real, you suddenly realize what things are really important and you just will not compromise on because they're so important, and what things you can. And and then there's, it's a demanding role and you have to be demanding of your people. And I find that in a leader in a military world, if you're demanding, you push your troops hard, make them work for things, make them do things for real, not slack off on things. They actually get way more out of it. They actually enjoy it more when they get pushed, when they have a leader that is uncompromising. They will tend to enjoy the role more. They'll tend to enjoy working for that person more, because they know they're actually, doing things the right way. And at the end of the day, I mean, this is the thing that I forget about a lot, but everybody shows up to work wanting to do a good job, right? Nobody shows up, wanting to half-ass things. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on these shows, but
You can do whatever you want.
yeah. And, and so, when you're demanding, when you demand excellence from your soldiers, they'll try to give it to you, and they'll actually enjoy the role more. And so that piece, I think, came fairly naturally to me, just because I knew, just from seeing it, uh, what needed to get done and what I just absolutely refused to compromise on. Now, the funny thing is, I became a leader in the Army a lot sooner than I became a leader in the banking world. The part that I kind of joke about, and I don't know if you've heard me say this, but in the bank they certainly have, is Army John never shows up at work, right? In that space, it's a different type of space. I'm still demanding and set a high bar, and I'm very clear on what I expect, but you have to approach it with a different leadership style, and I'm very aware of that all the time. And so I know that the leadership style I have in the Army will not fit my civilian career. And so I make sure that Army John doesn't show up. And Army John doesn't show up at work at home either. And I think that's because I had such a strong male influence as a father growing up, that you know, being patient matters with children. Loving, caring, patient. Uh, I had that juxtaposition growing up with my dad, mom, because they farm together, right? So two farms, and so I saw the two side by side all the time, and I think that really firmed up in my mind the type of father and leader I wanted to be at home versus not the type I did not want to be. Not to say that I'm not firm with my kids, but it's never in the way you think. Especially now, I put the time in as a father when they were young, um, and now I've got three boys that are fantastically behaved. I don't have to worry really about much, to be
Mhm.
quite honest. But you got to put the hard work in when they're young, and that's a whole other topic. Um, but that's, I think, how I approach the three different hats. If that answers the question.
Yeah, we actually talked about kind of what you said on a previous show with Kenny Rogers, and about you know the ability to go home versus leave things at work. And we talked a little bit about leadership, not just at work but in the household. And one of the things I know I struggle with, and I mentioned it previously on the other podcast, was the fine line between leadership in the house and becoming a dictator, and leaving that dictatorial presence at work. And your family will not respond in the exact same way as the troopers will, right? And so I know, as a younger leader, as a mass corporal and a sergeant, when I first was promoted, it became prevalent in the house, and I noticed it. My wife noticed it. Everybody kind of noticed that the bar was set a lot higher at home, and I wasn't exactly a kind person either. So finding that balance, I think not everybody can do. And so obviously you've managed to do that. And I think, like you said, it stems from the type of upbringing or mentorship or role models that you had, growing up, or even, in the military.
Yeah, it really does. I not to say, and I'm going to say this. Me and my wife were just talking about this today because I was chit chatting about this exact topic. She goes, "I can tell when you tell the boys to do something like go mow the grass, and they don't do it. Your blood is boiling." Right? Because in my other world, like it's just no. You do it, and you do it now. And so she catches me taking a deep breath and just leaving it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't come without effort. It's a conscious leadership style that I have at home. Now it works really well when I have a wife that understands me, understands the background, what could happen if I took a different approach. But she, you know what I mean. She's actively involved in their life as well. To be honest, I can a lot of the stuff that happens in the home, she makes a lot of the decisions, and so I only weigh in on the really big decisions, and so that works really well as a parenting couple. As we work together as a team to raise these children, where as the kids get older and older, to be quite honest, that um, sergeant or whatever at home really doesn't need to come out a whole lot. The only time it ever really has is cleaning up Lego. Like, have you ever tried to get your?
Oh
I've
yeah.
had to go full sergeant major when my kids were 4, 5, 6, trying to get them to actually clean up the basement, and there's Lego and toys everywhere, and they can't focus on cleaning up for more than 30 seconds. And then that toy they're cleaning up suddenly becomes the toy they want to play with, and the whole thing just goes off
Yeah.
the rails. Then yeah, not then you're sitting there. No, put that down, put it away. It's very directorial, but that's the only time I think I've really ever gone full army in the house.
I gotta keep my knife hand in check around the house. That's one. It comes out every single time to the wife, the kids. The knife hand flies out immediately when it's laundry, toys. If we're late for something, whatever. I notice it right away. The knife hand.
I
Um,
uh, I constantly and I joke about this at my other but the bank job, but there's in finance things go wrong. Things go wrong in any job really, but I think guys like you and I, if you've had the military experience, the one thing you can always say, listen, nobody's dying here. Like, this isn't
Mhm.
that big a deal. People are getting excited and all. Just calm down. It's just this. Nobody's dying. It's not the end of the world. And you get that perspective, I think, when you do these types of roles. That if you haven't gone it, I think it's a little harder to have that perspective.
I've actually used that in my civilian career, and I still work for the military. Only it's the Air Force, and this particular Air Force base, they're not deploying anybody. It's not an operational unit. It's like, nobody's dying, and so when people are
Yeah.
freaking out about certain things, it's actually for me. I'm sitting there like an army dude. I'm like, this is, you guys don't understand. This is nothing, and it's okay. Like, nothing will
Yeah.
happen. We'll get it. We'll get there. Like, it's fine. So
I find that, and I mean, this is a whole other topic around leadership in the Army and leadership styles. But there's one thing that's true that I've noticed, and that is tip of the spear leaders, people involved in the Army in the combat arms, so infantry, armored corps, artillery, combat engineers, are the calmest leaders I know because uh, they're used to so much going wrong and such large consequences for things when they do go wrong that they tend to have a very calm, for the most part, demeanor when they're leading. The closer you get to the tip of the spear, the less yelling there is, and the more professional the people are acting actually.
mhm.
And so, whereas you deal with leaders that are, and I've seen this a lot, that Air Force, purple trades, that kind of stuff. When you see them leading, a lot of times there's a lot more yelling because they're trying to put on that full metal jacket facade where they're screaming all the time and not realizing people don't actually respond to that. Um,
Mhm.
Everybody's there to do a good job. As long as you're calm, clear, confident, you're gonna get the action you need out of them. You don't need to be yelling. And anyways, that's a whole other podcast.
I've already got it noted down. I haven't decided when I want to do it yet, but it's a big one. It's coming. Let's rewind then a bit. I've noticed even over the course of about 14 years, 13, 14 years, I've noticed a change in the generation of soldier, male and female alike, that we are seeing come in the door. Can you tell us, some of the biggest changes you've observed over a much longer career than mine? We'll see if we're on the same playing field, but what are you seeing, and what have you seen in the changes over your career?
Okay, so there's two things that I've seen. I'm gonna forget the second one. So just remind me to circle back to um, tech skills and mechanical skills and stuff like that. There's an interesting question I often get asked in the banking world around leadership when people ask me about millennials, for example, and Gen Zs. And that is, how do you lead them? Because in our world, it seems like they don't want to show up on time. They're always in their phone. They don't want to do anything, etc. All the cliches you've heard about, the millennials and Gen Zs. And this is what I tell people automatically. I don't. How do you lead them differently? I don't. They're the same. And so what people are forgetting is that if you set very clear expectations, you don't have to lead them any differently. So we're in a classroom, phones down. I don't want to see phones. You control them, tell them what's expected, have set a high bar, and it's the same as leading any other generation. I do not have issues with the different generations. That's a cliche. It's a failure in leadership if you're having to lead differently with the different generations. It means you're not clearly communicating what your expectations are, what the outcomes you need you to achieve, what the timings they need to hit are, and then if they don't, there's consequences. Like, that goes away really quickly, and you don't have to worry about that piece there. At least been my experience. On the other piece, which I think is what you're actually trying to get to, yeah, there are some. So when I got into the Army 20, actually 30, I'm scared to say 31, 32 years ago. Oh my God. A lot of farm kids, etc. Kids knew how to drive manual vehicles, and they were very mechanically inclined. And And so you had troops that knew how to plumb, do electrical, how to drive, how to fix cars, how to drive, all that, backup vehicles, tow, all that stuff. And so you had a soldier, I think, that was ready to go that way, and much easier to train. Now, on the flip side, today, technologically, the kids are coming in way beyond anything I am, capable of thinking through. So they're really easily, you and I, even though I'm older than you, both struggle with comms. That's the computers in the army.
Mhm.
Ugh, like, right, that's something for me. There's a lot of buttonology when you get into that type of stuff that I'm not good at, and people of my generation struggle with. Every one of them. I don't know a single guy that's a Gen Xer that is comfortable with buttonology or switchology, whatever you want to call it. Whereas the young kids are, they're really good at that stuff. They pick it up a lot better than we do. But they come with mechanical shortcomings. They don't know anything about vehicles, how to fix them, how to really even drive them aggressively.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's just a trade off in skill sets, is really all it is, in my opinion. On the leadership side, they want to know more, which is a good thing. So they're coming in pretty educated, actually. And I've noticed that even with my own kids, they there's a different like they're more responsible than I ever was when I was a kid. So, and it's hard to admit that. So, and people like to bash the different generations, but Gen Z especially, God, like they barely drink, they barely party, like they're socially conscious, they're thinking about saving money, like they are way more responsible young people than I ever was. I was, all I wanted to do was drive fast cars, shoot machine guns, like crazy stuff like that. So I think, more adventure is part of my personality than I think the young kids do today. But they are certainly responsible, and I don't want to bash them there. So, you may have to adjust leadership styles a little bit just on how much you tell them. They have to understand and believe what you're doing, rather than, for me, I'm an action guy. So if you think about the leadership model, there's what's called Kuba leadership model. When you're trying to lead a group of people, you have to impart them with knowledge, understanding, belief, and then action. Guys like me are KA guys, right? Just tell me what we're doing. I don't need to know why. Let's go get it. Let's go
Mhm.
do something. The newer generation, the UB piece is pretty important. They have to understand and believe in what they're doing. And so you have to remember to bring them along on that journey. You can't just charge right into things. So I think there's a bit of a difference there. The 80s, 70s, they were all KA generations where the understand and belief, they it just wasn't part of their lives. They didn't need to know. They grew up that way. It was just do what you're told and let's go. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I had a couple more here. Maybe you'll agree or disagree. You actually hit on most of the ones that I thought of. One of the ones that I noticed just in the last few courses I've taught, um, despite them not seemingly prepared for the military life, they're remarkably hard to break. As in, I could scream at them, I could yell at them, I could march them up and down the square. Like we had people dropping like flies when I went through basic training, doing the same activities, doing the same thing. The failure rate is much lower, and that's like no fault of the military. They are not quitting, and I've noticed it. I don't know if you've seen the same thing, but resiliency seems to be a theme just in the younger generation. They're coming in a little bit greener when it comes to fixing vehicles, like you said, the hands-on stuff. But it's like they're so much more disciplined, and you said that exact thing with drinking and being responsible and being financially responsible things. And to me, they're not going to quit because they understand what quitting means, right? They've signed up, they want to see it through, and so they've weighed the pros and cons of that. And so I think all of those things coming together creates this like remarkably resilient soldier that just requires that right guidance that is slightly different generation through generation, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. So I I don't worry about the generations, to be quite honest. I'm quite impressed with what's coming up right now, and there's slight adjustments, like you said, in leadership style, but we're okay.
It's good. Um, on one of the other episodes, I talked with my good friend Kenny about fatherhood, and it, this one kind of glosses over that as well, but in particular with the military context. He was military as well, so some of the things might be redundant, but um, he described things like deploying away from his family. So I wanted to know, like, can you tell us a bit about what that was like? Both times you deployed, if there was differences, the first or second time. What were some of the biggest stressors you had just as a family, or for you while you were away from your family? Um, that was anything even related to the deployment itself, or was all the worry about being at home, or like how did that play out in your mind?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I had two very different experiences. My first one, I was 20 years old. I was just starting to date my now wife, of course, but very, very new to it. So I didn't have, to be quite honest, much in the way of family stressors, aside from being able to communicate with them at home. And just in the situation we were, it was very limited. It was very old school. Like we would write letters on a UN piece of paper or whatever. They would mail it home. So most of my communication at home was written, like handwritten letters. It's like MASH, the show MASH, kind of like very
Mm-hmm.
old school. A few phone calls here and there, but it was I was gone, basically gone, with very little communication, and I didn't have a lot of time to think about home or worrying about what was happening at home because of everything that was happening on the ground. You're just sort of worrying about trying to survive the tour on its own, just getting through it yourself. And so that, to be quite honest, although there's a lot of stressors involved in that, makes it easier, right? Because you're just focused on just the 6 inches in front of your face and trying to get through this thing. The second tour, on the other hand, very different. Young family. My youngest was a week old when I deployed to Afghanistan, and that's a very different type of um, departure and feeling when you're deployed. That was a very difficult thing to do, and so I think to effectively survive that, though, compartmentalization really works, and so there was my first night over there was the night where I compartmentalized and I put my family and my home life on a shelf. That's for later, and then really focused on the mission. And I think you have to be able to do that, or it's going to tear you apart in a situation where there's a lot of high stress, a lot of high activity, a lot of demands, and so the other piece that really helped me is having a spouse that was all in on this. She understood what I was doing, why I was doing it. We had a really solid relationship, so there was no. I didn't have stressors worrying about my home life, worrying about what my wife was up to, or anything like that. Um, I worried about could she handle the three kids on her own, and she, to be honest, that was a lot for her. But I knew that she was fully supportive of what I was doing the whole time and was working to make sure that I was successful. And so, in that way, having a spouse that's really bought into what you're doing and supportive and trying to make sure you're successful while you're away, um, makes it a lot easier. Really, I was a lot more fortunate than a lot of people around me. There's a lot of breakups happening while we were there, of course, which those are real stressors. That's really hard on guys, especially when there's literally nothing they can do about it. There's no impact they can have. They're on mission after mission after mission. There's nothing they can do. So I felt for a lot of those guys. That's for sure. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. You know, the kids portion of that, do they remember a lot of it? Do they talk about it? Do you talk about it with them? Is it how did it affect them as kids?
Yeah, they were young, right? Like really young. So my oldest was 5, I think, at the time, and 4 or 5. And so they have a very, at the time, pretty low understanding of what I was actually doing. And so, I know they worry about you. It's a weird thing to be deployed to a war zone where, and even I see it now, when you see things on TV, it looks bad. But when you're actually there on the ground, it's actually a lot less stressful than I think it is for the people at home. So I think they worried a lot. My kids worried. My older kids worried anyways. My youngest, he was a week old. Like he didn't know. Of
Mm.
course, that didn't have zero impact on him. Doesn't remember me even coming home because he was a year when I got home. My middle son vaguely, and so my oldest son is now in the army. He remembers it, and I think it's had the biggest impact on him because now he's kind of following the same path.
Look what you did.
I know. Yeah. Um, the biggest worry piece was my wife. I know she's an adult. She actually understands what's going on, what's at risk, etc. So she, worried way more than I did, or sorry, than the kids did. And I don't think I had, when I think about them, because they got such a strong mother, there was no real, psychological impacts to me being away, to be quite honest. Luckily, they were very young.
Right.
Young helps.
Yeah, we've talked now, a lot about leadership really, and leadership in the home, leadership at work, leadership in your business, or away from the army work. So let's shift it back a little bit then towards leadership as a whole. um I think a lot of us in the military have roughly the same opinions about what makes a leader, but maybe not. So I'm wondering, what is it to you that makes somebody a leader? And as a male, I mean that's what the show is, but just a leader in general. But somebody who's had to lead both male and females, being a leader of men, quote unquote. What is it to make a leader? And I'll follow it up with, at what point did you know that you were a leader? And when did people start listening to you? And I say leader really openly because we have ranks for leadership. That's not necessarily what a leader is, right?
Yeah, it's rank doesn't make a leader, that's for sure. And anybody in the military understands that. Certainly, rank affords you command respect. So people respect rank. It's just out of requirement. But that doesn't mean they respect you as a leader or even want to follow you as a leader. And you and I both know that. We've had all kinds of different leaders. And so, what really makes a great leader? And I, I sometimes I worry about talking about this because there are people in leadership roles that might disagree with me. But um, the first piece is I don't want to call it expertise, but knowledge. So you know the job, right? You've done the job as a troop. You know the job. You know what has to get done. You know what it feels like to be commanded as a troop. And so nothing. I don't want to bash RMC or anything, but young people that have spent time digging trenches, kicking in doors, staying, going without sleep, doing missions, that kind of stuff, make great leaders at some point because they have I don't want to say more empathy, but they certainly know what they're asking their troops to do because they've done it, and so they know when is too much, and the troops need a break, etc. When they need to feel appreciated, um, but they also know uh, where slacking off. They everybody figures finds a way to slack off, not do things. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
carry a
look like they're
clipboard
working
around.
hard, but they're not working hard. You kind of know all the little ways to get around things if you want. And so if you've been that troop doing those
Yep.
things as a leader, you can call bullshit on a lot
Yeah,
of things.
never bullshit a bullshitter. I've done it. I've carried around the clipboard and it's empty.
Yeah, exactly right. And so the leaders that have come from that space where they made a living out of trying to get out of things and not work and all that stuff can call bullshit on a lot of that quicker. So I think you gain more respect that way as well as, hey, this is a guy that is going to know if I'm trying to smoke him, or, you know, smoke job him right now. So that I think is a starting point is know the job, I've done the job, which is a real basic thing to say, but I think it does matter. Um, the second piece is, good leaders understand, and I had to learn this myself, that as a leader, you're actually serving the people you lead. It's not the other way around. They're not serving you. So you have to, humble approach to leadership, and having that servant mentality um, really forms the type of leader that you're going to be. Not saying that command presence isn't important. It is. Um, so the two, there needs to be a balance between the two. The other piece that I think I'm a big believer in is, and new leaders make this mistake all the time, is you're not the smartest person in the room. You're probably never going to be. And
Mm-hmm.
if you assume that you're the smartest person in the room, you're going to make mistakes. And so on missions that are of high, that are high stakes, really people's lives are at risk, et cetera, et cetera, involving them in the planning process or however you can to build buy-in on whatever you're doing really goes a long ways to getting people to want to follow you on that mission. One of the things that, and I'll say this, that I think caps it all off, and Afghanistan is where I really, um, I think, developed this skill set, is advocating skill sets. So you come up, if you're leading a group, wherever, whatever that happens to be, you've got to believe in what you're doing and really believe in the solution that you've come up with and the action plan that you're going to take. And you need to find a way to be able to communicate that clearly, but in a way that's, has passion around it, that you really believe that this is going to work. And that will bring a lot of people with you. And so passionately advocating for your plan, which is issuing orders, is really all it is. Um, instills a lot of confidence in men that you've thought this through. You've come up with something that you think is going to really work, and you really want them to come with you on it. So that passionate, the advocating skill set matters as a leader. And I know people like to think of leadership, especially in the Army, who don't have a lot of experience, maybe, as just directing, commanding, telling people what to do. But really, it's more advocating than commanding, and if that makes sense.
Yep.
There's some minor things, little here. There's little things that you command that have to be done. Hey, you're all bringing night vision goggles. They all have to have fresh batteries in them. That's command presence. You have to command stuff like that. But those are the little things, right? All the little things that can make your mission go wrong. There's certain things that you just have to say, no, this is how it's going to be, because there's no negotiating. And so on the
Mm-hmm.
things that there is no negotiating, you don't have to worry about advocating. It just is what it is. So does that make sense?
Yeah, you brought up a good point just about not being the smartest person in the room. I like that one because it kind of lends itself well to the generational thing. And I do this all the time already. I rely on the young kids for all kinds of different things. Like, hey, how do I work the freaking radio? Like, it was the perfect example that they just did the training, and I'm sitting there like, I haven't done this thing in like 4 years. I have no idea what to do here. And even things like, C7 weapons handling, right? The things that we were taught get changed, and they're more modern. And guess what? You're not the most proficient person in the room. Should we be? Yeah, we should probably be like touching up on that stuff, but you're not going to be as good as the troopers who just did it. And so I rely on them pretty heavily for the more modern training stuff. And Certainly like technology things. I find myself doing a lot in my civilian career as well. Like a lot of the young, I call them baby pilots, right?
Yeah.
They know a lot of stuff. They don't know how to lead, but they know a lot of stuff, and they came from RMC, and they're actually very good tools to help you accomplish that mission.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's when I say you're not the biggest brain in the room. Use the power, harness the brain power that you have in the room to come up with ideas, do things a different way that are maybe better, get things done. Your lead as a leader, people lose sight that your job is mission accomplishment, mission fulfillment. How it gets done a lot of times isn't that relevant, and the people that are working with you come up with a lot of great ideas on how to get from A to Z. Your job is to really just make sure you make the right decisions, use the right ideas to get you to Z. And I talked about buy-in and advocacy. Once you've got these young people kind of helping out with new ideas and showing you how to do things, they buy into this stuff a lot more than just straight up command all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah, you're the radio guy now, and man, like when you tell somebody that, they're like, "Ooh, I'm a guy. I'm the somebody. I'm the person for
100%.
this job, right?"
Yeah.
This next one is much more opinion based, I think, and it may be even a little bit off topic, but it all kind of blends together. I wanted to get your take on the Ukraine's decision to mandate all fighting age males into the military. And I have a point to this in the end, but I mean, is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? What are some of the drawbacks, from a military mindset? And I know you had a lot of experiences in Afghanistan with the Taliban, and the phrase that I'm, surrounding this with is fighting age male, and what makes a fighting age male, and is determining who is a fighting age male. And I keep saying male because this is not happening to females in Ukraine. Um, is that the right decision? Tactically, probably, but is it the right decision for a generation? Is it the right decision to not include females? And what can you describe that like in the Ukrainian context, just based on your experience in Afghanistan as well?
Yeah, that's that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I will start this by saying um, I understand all the decisions that have been made in Ukraine leadership wise on and what they're trying to do and why they're doing things. Uh, are they the right decisions necessarily? I'm not sure, but I understand. Um, I understand fundamentally, what they're facing, which is a fundamental, country, crisis to their entire nation. They're trying to survive as a nation, people right now, and so that makes the rules of life a little bit different than they are for the average person in the rest of the world. Fighting age males are typically 16 to 45, 50 years old. That's kind of the fighting age male bracket, and which skews hard to the younger, to be quite honest. When you see really 16 to 30, 35-year olds, that's the real meaty bracket of fighting age males, and it is outside of Ukraine. I'll talk about countries outside of Ukraine. It is a national security concern on what a country does with their fighting age males. So, if you look at, for example, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank. So that whole conflict there, whatever side of it you're on, it is irrelevant. There's a demographic problem in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank that's really leading to a lot of the problems that they are having in that part of the world, and that is the fighting age male population, 16 to 35, like that really meaty part of the curve, isn't employed. Is 25, 50% unemployment. So when you have a large chunk of your population as a nation that does nothing to do, you're going to have problems. China's got the same problem brewing right now. Their unemployment rate is just skyrocketing in that fighting age male bracket. And despite all the other concerns that you think Xi Jinping has, that's his biggest concern right there. That's what topples governments, is that bracket of people that get passionate about something and take it to the streets. You see the same thing at the G7s and all that in North America. Um, Young men need purpose. Young men need to be part of something bigger in life. Young men want to know that they're making a difference in this world, and so you see riots in North America. The what do you want to call them? The black mask people, Antifa,
Antifa.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
What that is young fighting age males looking for purpose in life, looking to make a difference in this world, looking to fight to make a better world, whatever that is. And so that demographic is really important to any nation, as far as really getting things done. If you can keep them actively focused on something. Now, when you get back into the Ukraine world, they've expanded that bracket. I think it's 15 to 65 now or something, and they've kind of burnt through the core demographic already of the 16 to 35 year olds. I don't know how many they got left in that bracket. You're seeing a lot of gray beards, if you want to say that, on the front lines in Ukraine. It Without getting into strategy, it's tough to talk. Like, they are burning through enormous amounts of human capital in that war, and once this is over, because every one of them ends, you've got to somehow run a nation with electricians and pipe fitters and this and that, and that whole generation or two generations of young men is going to be gone. And so I don't it's going to be very difficult for them to recover from this war, just based on losing that demographic. Now, the women piece, that's a really good question. It's there's two ways to I don't know, like, there's two ways you could really look at that. Historically, it's always been men that fight wars. It's happening again. And there are women in the military, of course. There's not a lot of women, even in our army. There's some, but when you get into the combat arms, tip of the spear, there isn't a lot. um, and it's by choice. It's a rough world to live in, and not many of them choose to do it. Now, can you force women to do it? Yes. I don't know that's the right decision. I think certainly um, Ukraine would have less manpower issues if they would have kept the women in the country doing all the purple trades, and there's a lot of background support work that needs to get done, that pulling wrenches in repair shops and all that kind of stuff. So they've lost an enormous amount of manpower by letting women leave. That was their choice, and you know morally it might have been the right choice, but when you look at the numbers and the job that they needed to get done, they lost an awful lot of people that could have been in support roles in that war, um, and would have created more fighting power at the front line if they wanted men to fight. So I that's one way to look at it. I disagree with what they did, just based on you know pure numbers and needing support in the background. Now, the other argument, which long term actually makes more sense, you can't create the next generation of human beings in your country without women, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need mothers, you need all that, and that's a really, people would say that's a misogynistic view. I don't think it is. It's the reality of life. And so if you're looking at the next 100 years of Ukraine's history, protecting the mothers is technically not a bad strategy either, and probably the reason why they're doing that. You're going to need mothers to create the next 2, 3, 5 generations of men. So
Yeah, I mean, even if they lose, right, or if an entire generation of men is lost, yeah, you have a whole generation of women that survived the war with their families. Israel was without a state for how long, right? And the nation of Israel survived, and that could happen in this case. And the only reason I even thought of that question was a bit by Peter Zion talking exactly what you talked about, is the geopolitics of it, and the numbers of people, and how it was essentially impossible. that even if they win the war, like the country would be crippled. And so
Oh,
that got me thinking.
yeah.
I was like, well, is using the phrase fighting age male and deciding that all the males should stay, is that a good decision or a bad decision? And I guess TBD, but
It is, but it's also that age group, and it's not a. I don't think it's a bad term because even locally in Canada, like our unemployment rate I think is touching 5 point something percent right now. I just looked at the numbers yesterday. Um, that we don't often worry about. We don't talk about in Canada because our unemployment rate has been so low that it's never been a security threat. But the
mhm,
fighting age male demographic in any country is a security concern. If they are not employed, you are going to have security problems. You're going to have all kinds of issues. And so we don't have to think about it in Canada because there's so many jobs here, it's not an issue. But if there ever is, mass unemployment, you just wait for it. There's going to be problems because fighting age males are fighting age males. They like to fight, whether that's
mhm.
G7 riots, they join the military, they join a gang, organized crime, etc., etc., etc. Fighting age males are fighting age males, and they fight when they have nothing else to do.
Preposterous amounts of testosterone. Preposterone.
Yeah, progesterone. That's a good way to put
I
it.
can't claim that term. That was from some old video on YouTube. I can't remember, from Power Thirst. We're bouncing around a lot here, but that's okay. The leadership stuff, I'm a lot more interested in, and one of this next question kind of came after the fact, after I kind of put the show sheet together. This one, somebody was asking me about this, and it really got me thinking. And then I started noticing things in myself. So I'll ask it first, and then I'll let you talk a bit about it. But
Sure.
as a leader, and particularly a male leader, and that part matters, is showing vulnerabilities considered a sign of weakness? So, for example, and I'll use myself as an example, should I show anyone, but in particular the troops or my subordinates, a vulnerable side of me? And I'll use the example, like if I have my kids around me and I'm cuddling my kids or playing with them and tickling them and whatever, and you see this complete change. And we talked a lot about hats. That hat they're not supposed to see, in my opinion, but sometimes you let that guard down and they see it. So when my kids stop by work and I put my dad hat on for a quick minute, all of a sudden my subordinates see this, like, oh, this guy is like not as serious, or do we need to take him as seriously? Things like that. Should subordinates see that side of a leader in particular in the military?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think I'll have an archaic opinion on this that people won't agree with. Maybe I would say it's okay to see some vulnerability. Like I'm talking two different worlds now. I've got a bank leadership role and I've got an army one. Um, I would say there's a scale, and the closer you are to people's lives being on the line, the more important it is that they don't see vulnerability. I would say, and it's a sliding scale, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it bad for people to see you as a human being? No, I don't think so. So, do they know you have a wife and kids? I think yes. People know I have a wife and kids. I think they will want to know that you're not a hard ass at home too. You know what I mean? You're not. I think if you were knife handing your wife and your kids when they showed up, that might not go over well either, right? Like they'd be like, "Holy, this guy's a psychopath." So it's good to see. I think that you're a normal human being with, um, normal needs and wants and all that stuff. That's fine. Um, However, I think there is a bit of a line there. Like it can't be too much. And I'll kind of relate it to something else. And we're talking military leadership here,
Mm-hmm.
but this bleeds across to how I lead in my civilian career as well. When you're a leader, you're not their friend. I'm sorry, you can be friendly and hang out a bit, but you're not your friend. You cannot be friends with the people you lead. It's the military's had a long tradition of that. I see people breaking that rule a lot. But at the end of the day, when it goes right to the real thing, you have to be able to commit your troops to death. That's it. And for your own mental well being, to survive it mentally, you cannot be in a position where you're nor can you make good decisions if you're having to send your best friend into something really bad. So there has to be that constant guard in your mind where you are always pushing a little bit away from your troops and always being a little standoffish. That's how I lead in the military, and the the piece in the bank. I'm pretty similar there. I'm pretty standoffish, not pretty, but I'm a bit standoffish with the people I lead there as well. Like we're friendly and we have a good time, and they like me and I like them and all that kind of stuff. But for example, after work, there's a work event. I'll buy one round of drinks. I'm gone,
Mm-hmm.
even in the civilian world, because I there's a familiarity with the social drinking piece that I cannot let them have. Um, and the same goes in the military. That's why we have different messes, etc. It's a truism. So that kind of bleeds into, can you be seen as vulnerable? Yes, but I think you have to really guard it. You have to guard that a little bit. Um, does that make sense?
Yeah, keeping the cards close to your chest, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think letting it slip and them seeing you with your kids every now and then just helps them see that you're not a psychopath. You're an actual normal human being. So that's a good thing. But vulnerability, that's a tough one.
So I,
I,
I wasn't even gonna talk on this point, but you just triggered something in my head then, and this will really put you through the loop. We talk a lot in the military now about mental health and preparedness and talking, right? We want people to talk about it. We want people to show some emotion or just talk, right?
yeah.
Tell someone. That's a vulnerability. And
So yeah,
can you show that, right? And that, to me, that's a significant vulnerability.
I think among peers or near peers, yes, it's probably important that you do that. If you're, to talking through things matters. Um, I think the military's approach to it sometimes isn't great. Uh, and I'm going to talk about pre-deployment and post-deployment in a second. But uh, I can't underestimate the importance of humor, um, in how people deal with serious issues and really complex issues, really dark issues. Humor actually really is cathartic and really helps. And so I think it's good to show vulnerability for troops to talk about tough things they're going through. But the part I don't like about how the Army approaches it is it's too serious, right? Like they make it too serious a subject. And and I know that, um, when you put guys in a really difficult situation, is what I don't like about The Walking Dead, for example. If that was real life, they would be doing nothing but F with each other with zombies and laughing their asses off,
Yeah.
because that is how people deal with really dark, terrible things in life is humor. And so you can go online and YouTube and watch troops in Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever troops are deployed. It is nothing but effing around, right? Like it's just the boys just mess around and laugh their guts out. They do that as a coping mechanism, right? It helps you deal with really stressful situations, with dark times. Ambulance people are the same way. Firefighters, they're all. It's a way of coping with that. So I do think, yeah, I think it's important that troops talk through tough things with each other, but it's got to be with a bit of levity. Does that make sense? Now, I don't think we're getting better at this, but um, how we prepare troops to deploy, the stressors they're going to see, and then how we prepare them to come home, the Army does not a great job of it, to be quite honest. And one of the pieces that I know when I was in Afghanistan, for example, because I experienced this on my first tour, you go over, your eyes are opened, it's quite an experience. You're living life in primary colors. and then you come back to Canada, and life is gray for years, right? Like nothing is fun anymore. Like it's just so boring and so safe here that it just drives guys crazy. And so they don't. There's two things that happen to guys. They don't coach them, and I coached this um, with my section, my group of guys before they came home, and I said, listen, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get home. It's going to be gray. It's going to be boring. You're going to hate life in Canada when you get back there. And so you need to work through that. You will get through it, but it takes like at least a year or 2 years to get through that adjustment period where you can enjoy life again, because you just don't enjoy life when you get home from those things. The other piece is the PTSD piece. We don't expose people prior to leaving to things that they need exposure to before going on a serious tour. I'll give you an example. Colonel, the guy that wrote On Combat and On Killing. The heck's his name? Anyways, before I deployed to Afghanistan, he actually came in person and talked to us before we left to get us ready to go. And I read one of his books, and he talked about who gets PTSD, who does not get PTSD, and what they've done a lot of studies. People that grow up primarily in rural areas, they grow up hunting, butchering cattle, that kind of stuff. They see death on a regular basis, just shooting gophers, hunting deer, butchering cattle, that kind of stuff. Tend to the occurrences of them getting PTSD are much lower than people who didn't grow up that way. And so that circle of life piece, that life and death piece, knowing what blood looks like when you butcher an animal and how much actually comes out, all that stuff, it matters to your mental health and your ability to just get through all of this without being destroyed mentally. We don't prep people very well that way. And then when they get home, I've seen this quite a bit. It's happened to my fire team partner, committed suicide actually for my first tour. People spiral, and one of the reasons I think that people spiral is they come home from something really traumatic and they just stop moving. So you come home, you're suddenly unemployed or you're not doing much, and that will put you into a funk as a guy. And your whole life becomes about what you did and that great thing you did and how crazy it was and all the dark things, and it just becomes your identity and who you are and all you think about. And people just start spiraling into this depression around how bad it was and all the challenges you went through. And I find that if people, and it's been my strategy in life as well, is keep moving, right? Like, yeah, those are rough things, but if you're always focused on the next thing and charging into that next thing, you don't tend to think about all the stuff that happened on your go, and you're on to the next challenge and the next challenge and the next challenge. They don't coach that with people, and it has negative outcomes. And I wish the Army did a better job of that, really. So do I think people need to talk about stuff? Yeah, but I think they need to be coached prior to deploying and when they get back or about to come home better than they are. And the problem is the Army tries to do it. So Afghanistan, on the way home, we had 4 days in Cyprus, and there was like morning sessions you had to go to, and they had psychologists talking to you, etc. Great. Here's the problem: they're psychologists. Army guys are not going to spend. Army guys don't listen to them. If you haven't done what they just did, your street cred on life advice is pretty small. Guys just don't listen to them. And guys want to appear hardcore. They want to appear tough, etc. And so a peer group of people talking that have been through what have you been through, like have deployed, that's probably more important in my opinion than any psychologist talking to you about what you should or shouldn't do and things. You know what I mean? Alcohol is, of course, everybody can agree it needs to get limited because that really doesn't do anything but cause problems. Um, but aside from that, that's really the only thing the psychologists tell you is don't drink. There needs to be a peer group of people that have been through it with you that can talk you through it, but also challenge you on what's next in life. What else? What are you doing next? Like if your life becomes about what you did, you're going to struggle.
The I'll plug this when I put out the description on Killing on Combat by retired Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman.
That's the guy, yeah.
And the other thing I'm going to plug is go watch the movie Fury. And you and I have been back and forth on this movie because you hate the tactics of a lot of it. But what I love about Fury is the camaraderie, and you touched a bit on it, was the dark humor in the crew. And that was one of the first things I noticed in that movie. I was like, that is exactly us every single day that we're sitting in a truck and everything sucks and you just sit there and laugh with the guys. And even throughout that movie, sometimes they talk about some really dark things that they did, right? And they're talking about it with themselves, but they don't give any street cred to anybody else. They don't care. The new guy comes in and like, yeah, who are you? Like, don't talk to us, right? It doesn't help. So there's a whole episode planned for psychology, mental health, suicide in men. Nothing that really pinpoints the military man, but there's a whole episode planned for that side of things. So I'm looking forward to that one as well.
Well, I am too. It's a good topic. Okay, so Fury, the end tactics piece, I struggle with. The tank crew itself, I don't think they could have done a better job of capturing what it is to be in an armored crew. And you're 100% right. And you see how they deal with really difficult topics and situations. And it's nothing but them taking the piss out of each other, right?
Yeah,
And laughing their guts out to get through it, and laughing at each other with each other, and it reinforces what I'm talking about. You need to talk with people that peers that have been through it with you. It's cathartic. If you look at, the older I get, the more I understand the Legion and those types of organizations on why they're actually so important for guys. Is that's exactly what they're doing, is they're talking through that stuff when they're hanging out, so they are important.
we have talked about a lot of different topics today. Like more so than I intended, but like we've talked leadership, we've talked kids, we've talked deployments, mentally preparing for stuff, mentally coming home from stuff. Oh, what am I missing? Ukraine. There's been a lot of things that we've touched on. I could probably do a podcast on just every single one of those topics, so maybe I will. What I like to do, to start closing things out is bug people for a bold prediction. And what worries, sorry, for you, it's like a 10-year. We'll say 10 years. What worries you the most when you consider, your lifetime in the military and as it pertains to men, and their roles in a larger organization? What worries you the most about the next generation, and does that worry extend to females? And how can you overcome those particular challenges?
Yeah, I'm worrying less and less about females. The Army's done some really good work on exposing some bad behavior in the ranks. We've got, I think, some great female leaders now in the Army who kind of put their arm around new female entrants into the military. And they've learned, the older females have learned from bad experiences and being exposed to some things maybe, and can really guide them through that life in the Army. Because you got to understand, this is what people don't, they criticize the Army a lot, but you're taking 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, sexual prime people on both sides, smashing them into crazy situations, and then saying you can't have any kind of relationship with each other. Like, you're asking an almost impossible thing, because um, it's just the dynamics of life, right? But we're getting far better at it. So I'm not worried about women as much, because I think the Army's matured. We've got great leaders in place now that are really sensitive to making sure they're protected, et cetera, et cetera. Men, on the other hand, I worry about that anti-toxic masculinity culture that's going on out there, and I don't believe it's an actual thing. Um, as a nation who has an army that is used for expeditionary reasons or for defense or for um, you know domestic response operations, you need strong men in the military, strong-minded men, strong-willed men, um, and that goes counter to a lot of the social media culture that you're seeing right now. However, um, there's an old saying: "Hard men make good times make soft men make hard times," and that cycle repeats itself. And I think we're seeing us kind of work through that culture a little bit. So I like that we have a really educated, more responsible generation of men coming up. I worry that there are fewer and fewer male men role models in their lives to show them what a good, strong male leader role model looks like. And, if I look forward 10 years, it's the role model piece I'm worrying about. Is there going to be enough strong male role models in their lives to help them be the role models they need to be in 10, 20 years? So that's, I think, where I would go with that. I think that we are not as at risk as some other nations, but I worry about it here. So that's where I would close.
I couldn't agree more. And I mean, that just from a statistical standpoint, I mean, we're watching the ranks of sergeant warrant, master warrant officer leave in droves, leave the military, and it's leaving this massive gap in leadership positions. But like you said, more importantly, role models. There's nobody to look up to for a lot of the younger generations, and you don't want to spoil the generation that is this up and coming Gen Z or whatever the new generation. I don't even know what they're called, but you know, like we've talked about earlier, they're a tough group of resilient young people, and if they can be guided and pushed into the culture of the military in a way that they buy into and that is effective, like we could be laughing, we could have one of this big resurgences in the Canadian military, or we could have a complete opposite effect or a complete failure without the proper role models and ranks in place.
Yeah, and I think this is a plug. This is my looking at the Canadian government to go, hey, do better, or the Canadian public. The Canadian Army is something that needs to be uncompromising when it comes to leadership, role models, and experience. And so, in order to maintain a credible organization that you can trust in as a population to accomplish the tasks they need to, you need to have a group of strong male leaders. A way to get that, and I can't understate this importance of this, is deployments. We can't contract, right? Canada needs to be out in the world doing difficult things, challenging our military with what the newest threat in the world happens to be, et cetera, et cetera. And if we're going to continue to build or maintain a, um, a military that's got strong leadership, that is capable of getting impossible things done, they have to have the exposure to some probably not nice things in order to continue to build those leaders that we need. So deployments are good. Canada needs to be involved in difficult things. We can't retract, and I've seen us retract as of late after Afghanistan. We really retracted, and you can see we're behind now. So we were in 2006 to 2014 one of the big credible fighting forces on the planet. We were a country that could get things done, that really was respected on the world stage. We've lost that, and you can see with the modern wars happening now, not only have we lost it, we're way behind technology wise, equipment wise, and we don't, without being involved in anything real serious, I don't know if we have the fighting spirit we used to have either. So that's another piece that we need to actually, I think, as a country, needs to be in a public dialogue that, hey, we need an army that knows how to fight, and
Mm.
in order to do that, they have to be deployed somewhere. So
Yeah.
I'll leave it with that.
We could talk for ages, and we'll probably do that in the mess
Yeah.
about where the military needs to go. John, it's always a pleasure getting to talk to you about this kind of stuff. Whether it's at work or in the mess or just whenever we run into each other, with our families. I'm really thankful you took the time today to just provide some insight on what it's like being, a military man and what that is, a father to kids, while in the military, while deployed, being a leader in the military. Today I'm calling you John, and tomorrow we're both going to be putting on our other hats, and it'll be going back to Warrant Officer Bar. So thanks again for putting on that hat today for me, and I hope you have a good rest of your long weekend.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Josh. A lot of fun today, and if you ever want to do it again, invite me. I'll be right back.
Right on.
Great.
You guys can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, at Penny Pro. Our Facebook page is now up. It's Mind a Man. Hooray. Like and subscribe and share. And whatever you guys can click on, please do. The more you interact with content, the more the page grows, the more views it gets. Whatever. I will plug this one. Become a paid subscriber to the Spotify channel for exclusive podcasts related to different topics and more controversial things or personal things. Releasing things, usually once a month. The one that is coming out is why I'm not drinking. And that one's personal, and so therefore you can pay for it. I don't really care. So follow the links below. We also love hearing from you guys. If you want to hear us talk about a certain topic, please let us know in the comments or by email. The Mind of Man needs some rest, or I should just go and do some other stuff. I don't know. I got to keep busy. I'm going to put on my resting hat, and I'm going to rest. Have a good weekend.
See you, folks.